So hello and welcome to another Valorant VOD review, and today we are going to be looking at this because this caught some people off guard, and it was Acend's pick for the split map, the deciding map. As you can see here, it was 2-2 in the final against Gambit, and Acend brought out this comp on split, and it looks like a pretty normal comp aside from this. Omen on split, and this was a very, I'm not going to say controversial because they ended up winning, but it was a very interesting pick, and I'm going to talk to you today about explaining why Acend might have picked Omen on this map of Split and how they utilized him. The first thing we need to understand though is just how rare it was for anyone to pick Omen. As you can see, Omen is here with 2%. His entire pick rate in all of the different games, only Phoenix and Yoru, who isn't even pictured on this, were picked less. Obviously Chamber wasn't available for them, and you could see that Omen was only picked on one map, and that was 14% of the time on Split. So Split was the only map that Omen was played on at all, and he was played by two different teams, and that was, if we go down, Acend, and I think it was Team Secret. Yes, so you can see here Omen only picked by two teams and only on one map, so this was definitely, you know, a pretty off-meta pick. And the reason for that is that most people and most teams will basically just tell you that Astra is basically just Omen, but better. You know, that's what most teams believe. She has, you know, just superior smoke. She's better for the team, especially on something like Split as well, where you're often going to pick a Raze, as you can see here. Raze's pick percent on Split, a nice healthy 68, the highest of her maps by far. That means that, you know, with Raze, you can go for the Astra Suck, and there's more utility usage there, so it's quite an interesting pick to instead go for an Omen rather than an Astra. But let's talk about why they did that. So to understand why we might pick Omen, first we need to look at the entire team comp as a whole, and that was a Cypher, a Sage, an Omen, a Raze, and a Jett. And really, in my opinion, it was these two, the Raze and the Jett, that this whole comp was built around, the idea of having these two agents. And this was something that was done by another team as well. Crew pulled off a Raze and Jett idea, and having these two agents play together on this map, and did it so successfully, beating both Sentinels and Fnatic on the map of Split using a Jett and a Raze. But that is where the similarity of Crew's composition pretty much falls apart, because as you can see, I've highlighted Crew's composition here with an Astra, a Viper, and a Skye, and you can see that all the other three agents are very different, but both sides were built around the Raze and the Jett. Now, Crew's lineup, if you look at it, is extremely aggressive. They have double controller, Skye is the initiator, who's probably the most aggressive of the initiators, and then a Jett and a Raze. No Sentinels in there at all, and this aggressive comp led to some very aggressive games. Crew were fantastic on attack. In fact, in their 24-round game against Sentinels on Split, 17 of the 24 rounds were won on attack side on the map Split. Now, Split is normally known as like maybe a slightly defensive map, and it's close to 50-50 these days, but generally speaking, back in the day particularly, it was a defensive heavy map, and to win 17 of 24 rounds on attack is pretty insane for any game on Split. But Acend decided to go for perhaps a more balanced approach. They, as you can see, have two Sentinels in there with the Sage and Cypher, so they went for a more normal approach, I would say, rather than Crew's all-out aggression. So let's talk about why they went for the Raze Jett and why that ultimately led to Omen being picked. Well, the first thing is, of course, on Jett you have Acend, and Acend is perhaps one of, if not the best Jett player in the world, and is obviously very comfortable on Jett, and aside from, I think, Bind, he plays Jett pretty much every other map. And so if he's comfortable with playing Jett on Split, you're pretty much going to say as a coach, sure, go and play Jett on Split. But the problem is, and we saw this with Sentinels as well, is that when Tens was playing Jett on Split, Raze is just very good on this map. Raze is very good on the map Split, and so it has been seen by others as when you don't pick Raze and go for Jett instead, that is kind of almost a throw. So they decided, well, let's go with both as well and add in that Raze, and thankfully they also had a very good Raze player. They have Zeke, who commonly plays Raze on the map Bind, a map that Acend seemingly never lose on, so they had a very comfortable Raze player as well, which allowed them to very easily go for the Jett and Raze. But as I said, unlike Crew, they didn't want to go completely crazy, and so they did have some Sentinels. Most notably Cypher, who Keyless was playing, and Keyless is a very good Sentinel player, and the reason that they probably went for this is that in that map, Sentinels versus Crew, Crew got pretty much dominated, and both teams did really, by the lack of vent control, because without a Sentinel, it is very hard, as most teams will tend to put 2 in Heaven, and, generally just put a bit of utility, be it Cypher Tripwire or be it an alarm bot from Killjoy. Generally, they'll just put a bit of utility on vents, and this is what Killers did. He'd often put a Tripwire here, or he'd put one in vents as well. So this is generally what they would be doing, just to give you vents control as well, to make sure that you aren't vulnerable to a vent lurk. And then we get the pick of Sage, which was an interesting choice on this map, but as I talked about last time in my last video, Sage is a pretty popular pick on Split. She is very good on Split, and Acend used both the wall in mid on some rounds, but also this wall on A, which is very effective for giving you orb control. As I talked about in that last video, this wall is just good for a lot of different reasons. It gives you a lot of space, and because, there's only 3 ways for attackers to go, it's just a very effective wall in general, because quite a few rounds in the game, there'll be no one on A, and when that happens, you'll just get a lot of information, and you'll get a lot of free rotations, and a lot of, good things happening for defenders, and it gives you orb control as well. So Sage, a pretty solid pick here, and it allowed them to have, Cypher control and man this B site all by himself, and it allowed for this A site to also have, any quick stop of aggression, whilst having 2 very aggressive agents in on mid, so that they could, play aggressive peaks on mid as well. But then we come to Omen. Why Omen in this comp? Well, obviously you need smokes. These other 4 agents, you don't have any smokes. So I guess, at the pro level, you're not counting Jet smokes as anything other than a tool to get away. So you needed smokes. So it had to be a controller agent. And when you are picking a control agent, well, let's start talking about them, right? We've got Brimstone, who obviously didn't see much more pick rate than Omen, only slightly, and that was mostly on Bind and Fracture. Didn't see any other play on any of the other maps, and is generally considered, one of the weakest agents in the game, so that makes sense not to pick Brimstone. And then you've got Viper, who is a very effective agent on Split, and saw quite a bit of play on Split, but the problem Viper has is that she can't be a universal smoker. She's kind of more of a Sentinel controller hybrid, where if you're playing Viper, you're probably often playing an extra smoke on top of that as well, and that can work very well, but when you've only got 1 agent pick left, Viper probably isn't going to be your smoker of choice, because she can't smoke, both sides. She has to put it down, and then you kind of have to go whatever way that you've put down your smokes, and for, at the pro level, that's kind of a bit of an issue. But then finally you have Astra, and Astra would seem like the obvious choice. Astra is the agent that many would consider is just better than Omen in a lot of different ways, and so why did they not choose Astra? Well, it all comes down to one ability, and it was this Paranoia. Now, this is one of the main uses of Paranoia that Acend used multiple times in the game, and then there was this flash across this side of B, so that when their, duelists were entering in onto the site, that anyone that was standing on this side of B would be completely gone. Obviously, there would normally be a smoke up towards Heaven as well, so, they couldn't just peek from Heaven. So normally there would be a smoke in Heaven, there'd be this flash across there, which meant that these duelists were essentially responsible for checking this left side, making sure there was no one in on this side or in at the back here. So, this angle here and this angle here. These were what the duelists were checking for, and if there was anyone on this right-hand side, hopefully they would have been caught by the Paranoia, giving them, more spaced entry and giving them a favorable duel against anyone who was playing anywhere around here. And that is essentially why I think Acend went for Omen over Astra. It was basically just the Flash. The Flash is the only thing that I can think of that really gives Omen the advantage in this situation. And it's because if you look at the rest of the team clump, there is no flashes. There is not really much initiating ability from any of the other agents. Basically, you have, good space creation with your 2 duelists, and you have good, lockdown potential of certain sites once you've got them, but there's no flash on any of the other agents you have, and so they probably went for Omen because, like Viper is a Sentinel controller hybrid kind of type, Omen is kind of like a controller initiator, controller duelist type with that flash, and so by doing that flash, he gave his duelists in particular, more chance and more space to roam into and potentially take favorable duels as they did it. And so whilst Omen might look like an odd pick to people who were just watching the game at first, when you think about this team comp and what those other 4 agents are lacking, Omen actually makes the most sense, because without Omen you would have no initiation ability on the team at all, and that means that, you know, doing certain set plays might be very, very difficult for Acend if they didn't have that Omen flash. He gave them that chance to have some set play potential. And so thank you for watching. I'll be back with more advice, tips, and tricks about Valorant, and have a really nice day.